Judging by a multitude of horror stories we've heard from writers during the current WGA strike, it's safe to say many working screenwriters in Hollywood have felt as if they are working for criminals at some point in their career. But what happens when that feeling is more literal than figurative? Well, just ask Dan Gordon. In 1971, Gordon was given the opportunity to direct a screenplay he had written for a New York set action heist comedy called Potluck. For Gordon, this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up, as he had recently felt relatively blacklisted in Hollywood after being fired from a staff writing position at Universal Studios by studio chair Lew Wasserman for stealing office supplies. And so, when he received a call saying Potluck's financiers needed him to start production immediately, he quickly packed a duffel bag, left behind his LA apartment, and flew to New York City that same night. He was given $100,000 to make the movie, and during the shooting was confident he was coming in well under budget. But he would later discover that not only had the financiers actually submitted a budget of $1 million to the IRS, so that they could later claim a loss on the film after blaming their inexperienced director for screwing up the movie, but also that those same financiers were in fact members of the Gambino and Genovese crime family, eager to use the movie business as a money laundering operation. Gordon soldiered on. During production, he was assigned a right-hand man and new best friend by the film's producers, a man called Muff the Button Man, who told Gordon he was so named because if the bosses wanted somebody's button pushed, he was the one who pushed the button. Gordon actually got along with Muff, and the rest of the alleged mobsters he worked with during production, and so he felt blindsided when they informed him they were pulling the budget and canceling production. Gordon and some friends, including, at that point, Muff the Button Man, attempted to raise money and finish the film themselves, as Gordon was unaware the financiers needed the movie to fail and remain unfinished for the purpose of their IRS scam. Sure enough, the movie was never finished, and, after Muff was arrested following an attempt to rob a doctor for money for the film, Gordon was now fearful enough of the same men who had once been his producers that he actually fled the country, heading for Israel. There he joined the Israeli army, even fighting in 1973's Yom Kippur War. Eventually, 10 years after fleeing the U.S., he would return to Hollywood and finally resume his screenwriting career. Surprisingly enough, Gordon never did write a screenplay about these real-life adventures, but he did go on to become a successful TV and movie writer. Still, one can't help but assume a feature film about a young, out-of-his-element writer-director making a movie for the mob might have been more entertaining than, well, at least one of the actually finished, legit films that Gordon's name was eventually on. Just as it's also a safe assumption that Muff the Button Man might have made for a more compelling screen presence than Rob Schneider. The year is 1993, and New Line Cinema is looking to ride their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles success and launch the next big martial arts family action comedy franchise with Surf Ninjas. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And this is your totally tubular co-host with the most, Chris. Here to hang loose on this gnarly episode. Sure to be righteous, my dudes.
I dare you to do it for the whole episode, Chris.
I'm really thinking about it.
Our shortest episode and least listened to episode yet. And that, you know what, actually, that might be the case anyways.
Yes,
we'll find
exactly.
Out. So it's nice to be back. This is, of course, our return to Summer Surprise after a little 1-month break there with Jake, July, and Hall. It was nice to kind of get away from Summer Surprise, especially since this year, you know, the computer really did us kind of dirty this year, didn't it?
Yes, it realized on our 3-year, actually this month, this is airing, this is our 3-year anniversary, and I think, the Summer Surprise gods, well, they want us to end the show. I think
that must be it, yeah. Although, you know what, maybe we should say, maybe this is one of the big ones. Maybe this is one of the ones that everyone's been waiting for since we started the show. They're like, oh man, you know, they're doing Failure Franchise. Can't wait till they get to 1993's Surf Ninjas. So yes, we are doing Surf Ninjas, a movie I long threatened Chris with when we started this podcast, but never really planned to get to. But as we said, our computer randomizer had a different idea. So Chris, why don't you tell people about 1993's Surf Ninjas?
Sure. It is directed by Neil Israel, known for a bunch of TV movies and series, and most notably, the writer of the original Police Academy. And, we talk a lot about how franchises failed. Well, the Police Academy movies went on to make 7 films, plus a TV series. So
2 TV series, a cartoon and a live action.
Right. So this guy is a little bit of the brainchild of successful franchises. So I'm sure you're wondering, how did this happen? But this is written by Dan Gordon. He wrote a bunch of TV too, including the Highlander TV series, but then went on to write Passengers 57 with Wesley Snipes, Wyatt Earp, The Hurricane, and then he has a story credit on the last Rambo movie from a couple years ago.
That tracks. When I watch Surf Ninjas, I go, this sure feels like the same guy that wrote The Hurricane and Wyatt Earp.
And the movie where the hero cuts a heart out of a man's body.
Rips a heart out.
Yes. The budget of Surf Ninjas is $6.5 million, and worldwide, it sounds like it couldn't even crack $5 million. So, quite the disaster, which we will get to.
But a more, once you kind of get into it, I will say, we have to fill at least an hour with this movie. I will say, once you kind of start looking into it, a little bit actually more interesting of a movie than you might think, at least in some regards. So I'm excited to talk about it, at least. But yeah, obviously, it's kind of, I was about to say it's a movie that time forgot, but in my research, a lot of people seem to say this movie has a big cult following, which leads me to my first question to you, Chris, because that cult following sure evaded me. So I just wanted to ask, before me even bringing this movie to your attention and before it popping up in this randomizer, how familiar were you with Surf Ninjas? Did this ever hit your radar at all, in your youth or anything?
Not even a little bit. I am a child of the 90s, but my focus was elsewhere when it comes to adolescent ninja films. This one just never did it for me. I never heard of it, nothing. Yeah, like you said, you threatened it with me a couple years ago. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just kind of one of the ones.
What about Three Ninjas? Where are you at on Three Ninjas?
Well, Three Ninjas for sure. Oh yeah, for sure. I was a fan of that as a child. Me and my siblings used to watch those ones for sure. So that's more or less where my loyalty lies.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. I thought maybe you were talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, of course. But
oh yeah, well that too. But even that, the first one came out in 88 or 89. I would be 1 year old. So yeah.
And I was obviously 57. So passenger.
You're passenger 57.
I beat you to it, you son of a bitch.
Oh fuck.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing we bring up Three Ninjas and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because they both feed into, I think, what we want to. At least one of the things we want to talk about with this movie. Why does this movie exist? Why in 1993 did we get a movie called Surf Ninjas? And there's actually a few reasons, but obviously at least part of it is that this was kind of feeding off of, and one might say at the very tail end of, a general kind of American obsession with ninjas, and in particular, ninjas in pop culture. This is something I'm very aware of, because as I said, I'm a little older than you, and I especially being a kid in the late 80s and early 90s, how much just ninja stuff was all over the place.
Yeah.
And it really starts for, the American interest in ninjas, it starts kind of in the 70s when there's that influx after Bruce Lee, becomes a big deal. There's the influx of Kung Fu movies. And quite a few of those are ninja focused a little bit, right? But it really blows up right at the tail end of the 70s into the 80s. Eric Van Lustbader writes a novel called The Ninja in 1980 that becomes a bestseller. And then you suddenly have this influx of ninja movies, American-made ninja movies.
Right.
Canon did the Ninja trilogy, which was Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja, and Ninja 3: The Domination. You get the American Ninja series, I believe also from Canon. But just so much ninja stuff, and of course it ultimately leads to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Ninjas would pop up as villains in other TV shows and on cartoons and everything. America was just ninja crazy.
Yeah.
Of course, a big through line of that, what you see with Enter the Ninja, right? The one that starts the canon ninja trilogy. The main ninja is played by Franco Nero. Ninja 3, The Domination, it stars Lucinda Dickey. The American Ninja films star Michael Dudikoff. America had a tendency to cast white people as the ninjas. That was a very big part. You did have like Sho Kosugi was like in a bunch of them, and he had a little minor moment here as a star. But in general, America was like, you know what, we like this whole idea of these Japanese mercenaries and assassins, but wouldn't it be even better if they were white and American, as America likes to do?
I really like Beverly Hills Ninja. That is a classic of mine. I am looking at the DVD right now in my office here. That almost plays on that exact thing that America was doing, and it kind of plays it for laughs. Obviously, with Chris Farley, the great Chris Farley, but it's definitely part of the DNA of that film is to be like, hey, we're making a ninja movie, and we hired this fat white guy.
Yeah, it got to the point where you had to be kind of self-aware about it. Even like one of my favorite kind of ninja movies to watch. And Chris, I don't know if you have any familiarity with this because I can't remember if we've ever talked about it. There's a director named Godfrey Ho. What he would do is if you look up his filmography, you'll be like, how did this guy direct so many kung fu movies, and especially ninja movies? And what he would honestly do is he made like a couple, and then he kept using the same footage and like re-editing it and putting in new scenes and just like basically creating these like jigsaw puzzle movies. And so there's like tons of ninja movies directed by Godfrey Ho, allegedly, but they're really just like kind of like the same sequences recycled and cycled. And then he would do the same thing where he would get like kind of like washed up or on the downturn American actors and have them film extra scenes and stick them in. Those are like, that's like the majority of the ninja movies that would play on like my local channels when I was a kid were those, stuff like Ninja Terminator and Ninja Elimination and stuff like that. So yeah, again, like just through the 70s and 80s, ninja crazy. And I think I'd say the real bridge to this one is probably the success, as we already mentioned, of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for a very particular reason, correct?
Yes, big time. And that's because Ernie Reyes Jr. Stars as Kino in the second Turtles film. And now his father, Ernie Reyes Sr., he's a pretty well-known stunt guy in Hollywood at this point for these ninja films, and the producers are wanting to give Ernie Reyes Jr. A trilogy. That's kind of the idea is to do a 3-picture deal, and they go to this father-son team. And they both are producers on the film. They both star in the film. And the whole idea of it is to get this off the ground. And what Trev is kind of getting at is this film is populated by a fully Asian American cast. So it's a big part of the DNA of this film is to, hey, Kino kicked off in TMNT 2, Secret of the Ooze. And he's got a little bit of, potential here.
Yeah, he seemed like he might be, you can always, there's those moments where someone seems like they're right on the precipice of becoming the next big thing, right?
Totally.
He'd starred in a Disney TV show called Sidekicks in 1986. That was like a martial arts, drama show. I don't know too much about it. I haven't seen it, but I know he was in that. And then, obviously he played Donatello in the first TMNT movie,
right?
Just in the costume. But then they liked him so much, they gave him the role of Kino. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of those movies, but I do remember that the addition of Kino in part 2 was definitely a good thing for the movie because honestly, the Turtles themselves couldn't really do the most martial arts because of the limitations of the costumes. And if you watch that, go back and watch that second one, Kino really is given like the bulk of the action.
Yeah.
And I'll just say it now, like Ernie Reyes Jr., like we'll talk about this movie, but at least in terms of Kino and whatever, he definitely has screen charisma. And he seems like he's pretty likable. He's definitely has the talent in terms of martial arts, as does his father. As you said, his dad was also a great stunt performer and fight choreographer. And they both have like a screen presence. So I kind of understand New Line looking at that and being like, you know what? Okay, we could continue him in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, or maybe we've actually got something here. Maybe we spin him off into his own project.
I gotta back up a little bit. You don't like the Turtles movies?
No, it's strange. Like this is a recent realization for me. I just don't think I'm a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles person because like either last year or the year before. And don't get me wrong, I definitely saw both those movies when 1 and 2. I didn't see 3 in the theater, but 1 and 2 I definitely dragged my parents to. I was like 9 when the first one came out, and then 10 when the second one came out. I definitely watched the cartoon back then, had tons of the toys. So when I was a kid, I was definitely into them. And then like more recent years, I did sit back down and rewatch them, and I just wasn't into them, like either of them really. Like not like it's like, nah, this isn't doing much for me. I am excited for the new one that's coming out just because it has that kind of Spider-Verse animation style, and I've heard good things. But it's just not it's not one of the properties I gravitate towards.
I am similar in recently rewatching them. I think maybe a couple years ago. I quite enjoyed the first one. The first one it still has that like darkness to it, to like maybe the original source material. 2 was definitely more disappointing as an adult. You watch something with adult eyes, which I think maybe we'll get to this film late in a second here, but sometimes things maybe need to live in the past, like I'm realizing that more and more as I grow up. A lot of people, a lot of friend groups are like, oh, have you got to go back and rewatch this movie from our youth. And I'm like, well, it's kind of like Kevin Smith. I like the memory of my Kevin Smith movies more than an actual rewatch. I'm sure I will be sorely disappointed.
Well, that second one, and let's give it its due respect, Secret of the Ooze.
Yes. Yes.
It really is kind of, I know we're getting off topic. No, I mean, it's somewhat on topic because we talk about how dumb Hollywood is all the time. And that one is like a great example of Hollywood just completely taking the wrong lessons from the first film, right? Yeah. And I know it was a huge hit, so obviously it's not like it hurt them financially at the time. But I do think, as you said, the reception was kind of, we all went and saw it, but then we all felt bad about it. And it's just like, the first one was really popular, it made a lot of money, and like you said, it had this like kind of darkness to it. It was a combination of the cartoon and the original Eastman layered comics, which were actually pretty dark. Mm-hmm. And people seemed to like that. It wasn't so dark the kids couldn't enjoy it. I mean, Casey Jones like just flat out murders Shredder at the end of it, and we all cheer because we're bloodthirsty kids who like ninjas. But then, the second one, which is like, do you remember that the second one? Well, I guess you probably don't remember. The second one came out only like, I think like 10 months after the first one or something. It was like super rushed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But they just like went full kiddie. And yeah, I do remember, as you get older, as I am, like as you'd like to tell me, you forget a lot of your childhood, but you.
I don't need to tell you. You wake up every morning and you have to roll out. Aches and, you get onto that motorized thing down the staircase.
Once I call the nurse in who helps me.
That's who your girlfriend actually is. Interesting. I forgot about that.
But I remember even as a kid going to see the second one and having that level of like secondhand embarrassment that I asked that I brought my parents with me. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, can we go see this? And like sitting next to my parents and be like, oh God,
sure.
I'm making them watch this. And I would have been 10. That's pretty bad when you're 10. You're like, oh my God, they're never going to forgive me for this. How I have Vanilla Ice is up there singing ninja rap. What is going on?
Yeah, but as you said,
I do remember liking. Yeah, and it was a success, and I do remember, as I said, thinking Kino is cool because again, he was played too as like the young kid that they befriend that knows martial arts. So he was like your connection character as a kid, and I think we were all like, yeah, Kino, I'd like to be like that guy.
It's kind of a cool story to hear him and his dad. Hey,
yeah,
like it's kind of your beautiful Hollywood story in a way, like these guys come over to this country, to America in the 80s. They're living in their aunt's garage, 1 bedroom. They're using a hot plate to cook their food. Didn't even have a fridge. And then they just kind of bust their ass doing stunts for these, mid-level, low-level, D-grade films, and then they kind of hit it off when they start working on something like Red Sonja, and then they get the Turtle movies. It's kind of cool when you hear these kind of stories, and it's nice, like with this one too, that it is a father and son developed and produced movie. We'll talk about what happened after the film, did not do well. But, there's got to be something that's pretty special about that,
Yeah, no, I agree. Like you say, like you're talking about being the ultimate Hollywood story. It's also the ultimate Hollywood story in that then they make one movie that fails and can never come back from it. But
yeah.
Whatever we're going to say about the rest of this episode about this film or whatever, there's a lot to respect about it on the page, in terms of them allowing this father and son to work together, and develop the story, create this star vehicle for the son. The dad still gets to be in it too. and then to like cast. Well, you said earlier an all Asian cast. We should point out almost all Asian cast with a couple notable exceptions. But for the most part, you said like definitely cast an Asian cast, an almost all Asian cast. But what is most striking about it, especially for the time of 1993, is it's a very like Asian martial arts focused movie with an Asian cast that never makes like jokes about that.
Sure.
And that's even something you can point to with him as Kino in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. Boy, listen, I mean, I grew up watching a lot of 80s comedies, and usually if there was an Asian character, it's because they wanted people to make jokes about their accent.
Yes.
Or their culture. That was kind of, that was the role of Asian characters in comedies. And that's not what this movie's doing. This movie, there might be a couple jokes like that, but it also even seems like they're kind of doing it in the spirit of making fun of themselves a little bit. And yeah, it's just kind of cool to see a movie that celebrates the culture and its performers rather than makes fun of them.
And honestly, it's especially hard for Asian men. Like that's an issue too, and especially with love interests. That's something we talk about even on this show a few times. Is that it's very rare is that even happening to this day. And back in the mid '90s, it was absolutely unheard of. Ernie Reyes Jr. was kind of helped to break through this glass ceiling of sorts. So it's kind of commendable. Like, again, whatever we say about the movie, let's give it some credit off the top. I think it's pretty cool to see, especially for the time. Yeah.
And I have to imagine we mentioned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I feel like I slur that every time I say it because it's like just a hard thing to get out of your mouth.
Well, your dentures aren't in.
We keep mentioning Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but obviously I have to imagine Three Ninjas played a big part in this too, right? Like this is definitely like an answer to that because the first one was the year before this, I believe.
Yeah, and like
Three Ninjas actually succeeds. Or how many of those were there? They did make 3 of them, right?
I think there's 4. I think there's 4 of them. Yeah, and like
I mean, 4 Three Ninjas movies. Was the 4th one called 4 Ninjas? If not, I'm going back and doing
3 Ninjas and a Baby. I mean, like again, also Karate Kid, right? Like there's like Karate Kid, 3 Ninjas, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is definitely the 3 that I think combined to lead the charge for Surf Ninjas. Absolutely.
Karate Kid, another example though, what we were saying, like make sure it's a white kid though, make sure the Karate Kid is a white kid. Yeah.
Totally.
And Surf Ninjas ain't playing that. Surf Ninjas saying no, they're Asian Americans. Damn it.
Exactly. Some interesting stuff about the production of the film is this is the first. We just did a video game movie, and we didn't really think about this, but until the research. But this is the first video game to precede the film itself. So we're going to talk about probably in depth about in the film and how it uses a Sega Game Gear and the Surf Ninjas video game. By the way, I had a Sega Game Gear. I don't know if you did, but I had one of those, and they were bricks. They were 20 pounds, I think.
Dude, I wish this is going to be one of the most uncool things I've ever said on this podcast. And I've said a lot of uncool things. But not only
are you about to tell me there's a Star Trek minute in this? Because
you know what, I'm sure there is, but I didn't get into it. Ernie Reyes Jr. probably did stunts on some Star Trek show.
Sure.
But no, I not only did I not have a Sega Game Gear, I did have Game Boy. So at least give me that,
Sure.
But when it came to like getting the color handheld, I made sometimes you just make the wrong decision. Some people invested in HD DVD instead of Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Some people were like all in on beta instead of VHS. I looked at the color handheld systems and I said, Sega Game Gear, I'll get an Atari Lynx.
I mean, to your credit, the Game Gear also bombed horrendously after a while.
Well, I'm guessing that the Game Gear, you can tell me if this is true, I'm guessing the Game Gear had the same problem my Atari Lynx had, is that you're like, man, I can't wait to play this game. I'm 2 levels in. Oh, my batteries are dead.
Oh,
that thing, 8 batteries, like nobody's business. So.
Oh yeah, same deal. Game Gear, I think you got 20 minutes. Like it was no road trips. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But this is so funny because the game Surf Ninjas was created in conjunction with the script. And then was released about a month or 2 before the movie came out. Obviously the game failed. Because nobody knows about the connection as well. Remember, we live in a time of social media now, but back then, just this game shows up and has connections to a movie that hasn't come out yet. I think that was a bad idea. But yeah, another thing, Neil Israel, we said this was the director. He's actually on record saying that he didn't want to make this movie. Yep. And he was actually not the first choice. The first choice was the writer, Dan Gordon. He was hired to direct the film as well, but due to some casting decisions and maybe some fights with the producers, they fired him, and then he had nothing to do with like the on-set stuff. He was gone before they rolled cameras. He still gets the written by credit, and then I guess Rob Schneider, who is in the film, he has some uncredited writing. I don't want to use the word punch-ups for two reasons, because it's a pun, and then also because they're not funny.
Yeah, punch-ups usually suggest that you were making jokes better or something. So.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? Maybe they were even worse originally.
Totally. Yeah, well, you know what? Maybe. Also, before we get into it, I gotta just bring up my fellow Canadian great. Leslie Nielsen is in this film, and he plays the big bad. One of his very few big bad roles. So, I'm sure we have a lot to say about that.
Well, he definitely comes over with Neil Israel, right? Because one thing we didn't mention is Neil Israel is also one of the writers of The Naked Gun.
Totally.
And this is, it's funny because it's when you sit down to watch this today and Leslie Nielsen shows up, you go, okay, of course, Leslie Nielsen and another one of these. This is all he was doing at the time. But then you was thinking about the timeline of this. And The Naked Gun, the first one was 88. And then Naked Gun 2.5 was 91. Mm-hmm. So he'd only done 2 of the Naked Guns at this point, and the only other parody he'd done in that run right there was in between those 2. He did Repossessed, in 1990. Now I know he obviously had done Airplane before, and he'd done Police Squad on TV, but this still Surf Ninjas is at kind of like the very beginning of him becoming just the comedy parody Leslie Nielsen.
Yes,
you do have to remind a whole generation that he had a decades-long career before that as a very serious actor.
Yes, exactly.
It's kind of shocking to go back and watch old Leslie Nielsen movies and see, because you said not like one of his few big bads. He actually is like a heavy in a lot of old movies, and he can be really scary and like tough. But he was one of those actors who could really do it all. But then when Naked Gun blew up, I mean, that just locked him in for the rest of his life to be like, he's just the parody guy. And it's pretty obvious why he's even in this. You figure like I said, Neil Israel probably obviously brought him over, but you can watch this movie and just sense that was probably written to be an Asian character. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, we can get Leslie Nielsen though. All right, just throw in a line that says he's like a foreign dictator or whatever.
Totally.
And then he, that's just so they can put Leslie Nielsen on the poster. Like that's all. That's the idea, right? There's just to sell it off the success of Naked Gun.
Now, Trev, was it as successful as The Naked Gun?
Well, we're talking about it, aren't we?
All right, let's get to it.
Yep.
Cinema presents an awesome, ripping, totally stoked.
Get on with it.
New movie, Surf Ninjas. It's the story of these kids who get booted from their country by this evil dude.
That was then.
Now they're growing up in L.A. And their life's one major vacation.
Just gotta wax the old man-to-wave friction-reducing vehicle. Surfboard.
But some gnarly ninjas give them a blast from their past.
Those boys die tonight.
So they gotta split with their one-eyed guru.
Your Highnesses.
Huh?
And go back and save their country. Which is cool, because they meet this mystery babe.
You wanna go to the mall sometime?
And like one dude gets these superpowers. One can see the future in his Sega game. And one's a geek.
There's dynamite here. We'll throw it at him. I got one. 1, 2, dudes.
And now they gotta fight the righteous fight. And basically kick some. You gotta see Ernie Reyes Jr. Rob Schneider.
He can get a job as a sushi chef, no problem.
Wild Thing Tone Loc.
Brothers don't serve.
And Leslie Nielsen as Colonel Chief. In a film by Neil Israel. Surf Ninjas.
I love the part when I was like, Sorry.
Brothers Johnny and Adam live with their adopted father Mac in mid-90s Los Angeles. They're accompanied by their wacky best friend Iggy and coast through their adolescent lives as fun-loving surfers. Suddenly, and mysteriously, they're accosted by a band of ninjas, sent by the evil Colonel Chi to kill them. But luckily Zatch, a one-eyed former royal guard for the Patusan monarchy, comes to their aid. This is when the brothers learn the truth about the royal birthright to the Patusan throne, and that they must travel back to the motherland in order to take down the tyrannical rule of Colonel Chi before all hope is lost.
Ah, yes, surf ninjas. One thing people might notice listening to that is that Johnny, Adam, and Iggy are not ninjas. So we can talk a little bit about this title of the movie as we go along. But so this is a first-time watch for both of us, Chris. Why don't you go first? I'm very curious to hear what you thought about surf ninjas.
Okay, so
because look, we love Naked Gun, we love Leslie Nielsen,
Yeah.
I've laughed at Rob Schneider a couple times in my life, so let's.
Yeah, same. This goes back to what I said earlier, like 20 minutes ago. And I said, sometimes things need to live in the past, right? And like, I have no nostalgia for this movie. I have no hidden love. I never watched it when I was 5. I never watched it when I was 10. I watched it as a 34-year-old man. And it's like, this movie is just terrible. Like, it's bad. I'm not even gonna bury the lead. It's bad. Like, it's a poorly made movie in most senses of the filmmaking process. Like, it's called Surf Ninjas, as you have said. There's a severe lack of surfing and a severe lack of ninjas. Don't really understand that. I was very much like Ian Malcolm tapping my TV screen. It was like, you're gonna have surf ninjas in your surf ninja movie, right? My rule alarm off the goddamn chain with the Game Gear, which we have to get into in detail later. But I think this gives off like big Disney Channel made for TV vibes, in look and feel. And there is something charming about Ernie Reyes Jr. as Johnny. He's got something there that I think he could be a fun child star. But Trev, the problem about this child movie is everybody's in their 20s, and I think that does actually damper the film, because if I was to put my brain into a 10-year-old body, I would look at this and not be able to really see myself in these characters, right? Like, that's why Three Ninjas works. That's why you get 4 fucking movies out of those movies. And Karate Kid is that the viewer gets to see themselves in the protagonist's, journey or whatever. And in this movie, his younger brother Adam is just like a non-character, and he's not even the fun one. So it's like, that sucks. But you don't see yourself as Johnny. He's too old. You definitely don't see yourself as Iggy because his receding hairline. He's 30. I think Rob Schneider was 30 years old or something when he was filming this movie as a high schooler. Yep. And it's like, it is painfully hello, fellow kids.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
Yeah, some okay production value. Like, they filmed in Thailand, they filmed in Hawaii. Like, that's cool. Don't get me wrong, that's cool. But this was a movie that I was like, oh, okay, this is a movie I feel is the chore of the podcast for us. Like, this is the movie that I'm like, oh man, I really just got to get through these 80 minutes. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with Trev and talking about it for sure. But I'm not into this.
Yeah, no, it's aggressively bad. It's aggressively bad.
Believe me, I was not worried that. Sometimes I am a little worried that you're gonna come out and be this what's that word when you're
idiotic.
Yeah, sometimes I think you're gonna be an idiot, and in this one I was like, no, he's smart enough to think this sucks.
Yeah, no, it does suck. It's. You had the right thing when you said it's poorly made, because that's the real problem here. I mean, I'll go as far as saying this is a concept that could work. There are some good ideas in this movie for a kid's adventure comedy. Ernie Reyes Jr. is definitely likable and has screen presence. There's a lot of elements here that maybe if they were made by a director who wasn't on record as saying he didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, financed by a video game company primarily to sell a product, and it wasn't rushed. Like, I think the whole thing was filmed in like 5 weeks or something.
Mm-hmm.
maybe this could have been something. Maybe this could have been as successful as Three Ninjas or the early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. But instead, we have this atrocious piece of crap. And it is a shame because I really do think in a lot of cases, it's the really poor editing and like filming style that's undercutting a lot of what could have made this actually work and what could have been special. And just a lot of like bad comedy that the movie hangs on a little bit too much. I was trying to think, to go back to something else you said, while watching it and really, strongly disliking it, there was a part of myself that kept saying, well, what if I had seen this when I was 10?
Yeah.
What if, because I didn't, I just somehow, this came out by, I don't know, maybe I just didn't care from the trailers or whatever. Maybe just like the rest of America, I just didn't even know it came out. I don't know why exactly I missed this. And like I know I never came back around to it because I heard nothing but bad things.
Right.
But then in doing the research for this film, as I'm sure you saw also, the cast members talk about how, to this day, they'll be at conventions and so many people come up with like tattered VHS copies and say like, oh my God, when I was a kid, I watched this over and over and over on VHS. And that kind of doesn't surprise me because it happens. We've talked about this before on the podcast, especially in like that era of the 80s and early 90s. There were a lot of movies like that, right? They would just play on TV all the time, or they would become video store rental hits, and people would kind of get obsessed with them. So I was like thinking, okay, well, maybe I could have been that kid. Maybe I could have been the 10-year-old who got really into Surf Ninjas. But then I remembered that at 10, as I just said earlier, so this is why it was relevant, I didn't like the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, right? At 10, I was like, oh, that's pretty childish and stupid. So I can only imagine this one would have aggravated me more. So I don't know. It's like surprising to me to hear that people got that into it because I found it borderline unwatchable through a lot of it.
Yeah. I told a friend that I was like, I gotta watch Surf Ninjas for the podcast this weekend, and all he said was, I'm predicting a 1-star review.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong. Like I like to go into these movies with the best intentions. I don't want to hate something before seeing it. And honestly, listeners, I do try. And this one was, aggressively bad is perfect. And when you say about being a child and thinking if you would like this, it kind of goes back to me talking about how cool it is to be the Karate Kid. It's cool to be Kino with his turtle friends, but this one is just kind of like, everybody's so annoying. And I think it's almost like because of the destiny aspect, because the whole idea is like, again, what I said before in the plot is these kids find out that they're destined to reside over this fake country in the middle of the ocean or whatever. And that's so far removed from like modern society that I'm just like, well, that seems like that would suck. Like, hey, I'm into like video games and surfing apparently and like into living in LA. And all of a sudden it's like, it's not cool to aspire to go live on some isolated island. You know what I mean? Without internet. Like, I just don't understand. Like that wouldn't fly as a kid. And then also Leslie Nielsen as the villain. I love Leslie Nielsen, okay? But this movie feels like Frank Drebin got lost in Asia, right? And it's like, there's one bit that is kind of funny, I will say, is the phone bit. When he's running in the cave, when the phone's ringing, and he has to pick it up before they hang up, and it goes to the voicemail.
Out of the way. Hi, this is Colonel Chi. I'm not in right now, but if you leave your name and number and the time you call, they get right back to you. And don't hang. Yes? Satch. I should have known. Kill him. Kill them. Hold on for a second. I've got call waiting. Yes. Kill them. Kill them immediately. Yes, now where were we? Yes, kill them. Send more men to Los Angeles. Coach.
That bit was mildly funny to me. But the problem with having a villain that is so non-threatening, almost comforting in a weird way. You said it earlier before that kids like something, what do we like? Bloodthirsty children or whatever you said. You made that joke, right? And personally, me and you have talked about how people like to censor children from a lot of stuff, but kids actually like to be scared a little bit. And kids actually like, a villain. And I think the reason why, Ninja Turtles works, or Star Wars for that matter, is Shredder is scary. Darth Vader is scary. if you want to get on board with this ninja crew and you want them to defeat the bad guy, like you want to be on board. You're not there as a kid to take the piss out of the subject matter. You know what I mean? And to have this bumbling idiot as your villain, no wonder it's not memorable. Nobody's saying, "Oh wow, I can't wait to see, Colonel Chi from Surf Ninjas." Like it just seems like it's a forgotten villain. And maybe I'm giving the movie even too much credit by just even thinking about it on that level. But like, where's your head at when I bring that up? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I do want to interrogate that a little more because I'm going to slightly disagree with you, but not actually disagree with you.
Okay.
Because what I'll say is you're right in that Colonel Chi and Leslie Nielsen is a big problem with this film, but for a reason you mentioned. But I think there's one of two ways they could have done it, and they just didn't do it the right way. Because the real issue is that, as you said he's kind of too Frank Drebin-ish in this. Mm-hmm. Well, that would actually be fine. You could have a completely comic villain, I think, if he was more the focus of the movie. Mm-hmm. If Leslie Nielsen was all over this and that was like he was, the goofy villain and he was the takeaway and what we remembered, then we might look at this as like, oh yeah, that's one of my favorite like Leslie Nielsen movies.
Sure.
But this has like big Leslie Nielsen was only available for 2 days energy. He's barely in this movie. So the problem is the movie positions him like he should be scary because he's barely in it. And I think this is a big problem with the film. He never interacts with our heroes until the very end of the movie.
Right.
They have no scenes with him until the final battle when suddenly he just pops out and they don't even have any dialogue then. He just pops out, starts going, ha, hoo, ha, and sort of like trying to kill them with his sword. And it's like, well, wait, they've never interacted with him. So like that, I don't feel any connection. I'm not like really rooting for them to beat him because they've never even, had a discussion with him or anything. But that would also like that might work better if he had been throughout the movie, mm-hmm. but he's just barely in it. So I don't know. You have to have it one of two ways. He either needs to be a completely comedic character who's allowed to steal the movie by being in a lot of it, and we know Leslie Nielsen could do that.
Yeah.
Or if he's only in a little bit, then you're right. He has to be actually scary because that's how Shredder is handled in the first TMNT movie, right? He's not in it a lot. But that's because he's just like this really intimidating figure when he shows up and he's there to scare kids. And that's
right.
What you could have done here too. Yeah.
It's funny you bring up that they don't talk to each other until the end. And they don't even really talk. And presumably Colonel Chi killed their parents. Mm-hmm. Like that's the whole idea is Colonel Chi, enters their village of Patusan and kills the monarch, kills the royal family, aka their parents, and then what is it like an American mercenary or whatever? Mac decides to take the kids with help from Zatch, which is like that royal guard, and they hide them in America, right?
Yeah.
And to not even have a conversation about it is big. Like, why didn't Drax talk to Thanos energy?
Yeah. You mentioned the phone bit, though, I will say, because you mentioned the part with him running to grab the phone. I'll say the phone joke that I thought actually was pretty funny was when he's on the one call with his men that are like going after the kids, and he's like, kill them. Hold on a second, I've got another call. What's that? Kill them. Anyways, I gotta go back to their call. Sorry, kill them. So he's just like taking multiple calls. I thought that was a good joke. And
yeah.
You can kind of sense that Leslie Nielsen was probably just allowed to do whatever he wanted in those bits, and that's why they're the moments that actually work. But like you said, Leslie Nielsen is in what? I don't know, like 7 minutes of this movie, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But instead of him, we get Tone Loc.
Yeah. That was the other... So when I mentioned that there was a couple notable non-Asian cast members. Tone Loc.
So did Tone Loc have a moment in the mid-90s?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Tone Loc had a moment as a performer. Like Funky Cool Medina, Wild Thing.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously he had this one album that like blew up really big, and he kind of just rode the coattails of that for like a long time because that was like in the late 80s, mm-hmm. and that definitely carried him through to being a little bit of a movie presence. Because I mean, after this, he also goes into like Ace Ventura. He's a voice in like Bebe's Kids. He definitely did have
Fern Gully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny.
To credit where credit's due, he does have an amazing voice. Like it's kind of enough, right? And he's one of those guys that's just recognizable through his voice. So
I do like that he plays a cop in Ace Ventura as well. So it's like they almost like same universe of
Yeah, I'm just gonna assume it's the same cop, and
makes it funnier. But he's just like such a nothing character because. And again, listeners, I know we're talking about surf ninjas, and I'm like, oh, there's a nothing character. But if you remove Tone Loc from this movie, nothing changes.
I really did. I was honestly trying to figure out, because I mean, am I wrong too? He just like completely disappears from the end of the movie. Like you see him once during the final battle, and then I don't think he's there at the end when they like are celebrating their victory and like giving their speech. I might be wrong, but I just didn't even notice him there.
Probably not.
Maybe he just wasn't available to film again. So I was just like, was he killed in the battle? We just didn't see it. But yeah, like you just said, I was trying to figure out like why is he in this? Because he's this detective who is investigating, the attack on their store when they're back in LA, and then the kidnapping of their uncle, and he's trying to figure it out. And then he just like joins them on the adventure, but as you just said, like he never does anything crucial enough to justify his addition to it. And it really just felt like it's one of those very cynical things of like, we put Tone Loc in it, that's another quadrant, or that's another fan base that we can pull in, because there's no reason for him to be there.
Yeah. Well, especially when he just randomly decides to be part of the crew. Like there's a moment where he gets knocked out and then they stow him away on the ship to go to Patusan, and then they get to Patusan and then he opens the door and he's like, you know what, guys, I'm with you guys now. And it just goes nowhere. I don't know.
But did you like the joke about shitting out the handcuff key?
Oh yeah, he eats it every Tuesday or something. He eats a key every Tuesday just in case.
Just in case, yeah. Okay. That's kind of funny.
That is funny. Speaking of Patusan, okay, I got to bring this up. All right. The narrative of the movie is around this mystical place, Patusan, right? And when I'm watching the movie, I'm supposed to understand that Patusan isn't like a well-known place, and this like destiny is kind of like there's something mystical going on here. And then when they're being like the kids are being chased by Colonel Cheese ninjas in LA, they go hide out in Little Patusan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, hold on. Because so this country is well known. This kingly destiny is well known. Like, what's stopping from the bad guys from just like going right there? Which actually they do immediately. Like, is everybody's just like a bonehead? Like it goes back to what you were saying about it just being poorly put together.
It's weird because like that's what I mean about where the filmmaking is failing. What could have been actually funny. Because you mentioned this idea that they're like, we didn't even know we were from Patusan. Now we find out that there's a little Patusan. That should have been played to be funnier than it is.
Yeah.
Like I have a good example of that I just saw. Like I watched the show What We Do in the Shadows, best comedy on TV, I think. And the character of Nadia in that, the one vampire, she's from Antipaxos, a small Greek island. And they just started their 4th season, and there's like a whole joke where she just found out that there's a little Antipaxos in like their small like New Jersey town that they live in, and it's just like 2 blocks, and it's like that was played very, very funny. This idea that like, oh, like any country has like a little version of it in any like major city, right? Even something as small as that. But this movie doesn't do that. This movie like just does like, no, there's little Patusan, and it kind of plays it at face value. Where he goes there and like actually gets like a big kind of exposition dump there and like learns more about his history. And it's just like, wow, it's strange. Not that I'm saying Police Academy is like the funniest thing in the world, right? But like, the first one was a serviceable enough comedy to get like a gigantic franchise, as you mentioned. Then Neil Israel goes on to write Police Academy. So as we know, he's worked with the Zuckers, It's weird that he so often seems to not see where the humor is, or just like undersells it and misses it. But again, maybe it's just because he didn't care. Maybe this was an easy paycheck for him.
Yeah. Speaking of bad comedy, there's a lot of it. So maybe this is a segue for everything. But there's Can I talk about the weirdest joke in the whole movie? And I wonder if you clocked it. So sure. I'm going to explain it, and you can nod along or chime in. But in the movie, we meet Kelly Hu's character, who we haven't even brought up yet. But Kelly Hu is in the film, and most famously as Lady Deathstrike from X2, X-Men United. That's who she is for me, anyways. Had a big poster of her on my wall. Big fan of her. And she's in the film, and she's presumably, 14, 15 in the film? She filmed the movie at the age of 25, but in the film, she's like 14 or 15. Now, it's said in the little Patusan scene that he's destined, or our main character, Johnny, played by Ernie Reyes Jr., he is supposed to be wifed up to Kelly Hu's character, when they turn, whatever, 16, 17, 18, whatever it is. And then she joins along on the journey. They go to Little Patusan, and it's surrounded by like mercenary ninjas, right? And then there's this moment where Kelly Hu is like, I got a plan. just follow me on this. And she goes up to these like 4 grown men mercenaries like in the bushes and pops out, and she's looking, like she looks young, obviously, but she starts to kind of act kind of sexy, like, hey, come over here. Let me tell you something in the bushes. And then lures these 4 grown men that follow her into the bushes. They get beat up. And then all of a sudden Johnny's like, whoa, what did you tell them to get them to lure you over here? And she goes, you'll find out on our wedding night. Mm-hmm. So did like this presumably 14-year-old girl promise like an orgy? And is that funny in a kid's movie, Trev?
There's a couple of moments in this, because I definitely clocked that moment. There's a couple of moments in this where the humor suddenly goes like wild in a sense where you're like, did the filmmakers just get kind of bored with making a kid's movie? Another example I was thinking of is that during the final battle, when Ernie Reyes Jr. is fighting Colonel Chi, and we should mention Colonel Chi, like in a flashback, we learned that in his initial raid on Patusan, when he murdered their parents, he was stepped on by an elephant, and it like smashed half his body, and so half of his body is now robotic. He's a half robot, half man, and he's always trying to avoid getting his robotic half wet because that short circuits his circuitry. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment during the fight where his robotic arm starts malfunctioning, and it like grabs his dick, mm-hmm. and he starts like pulling his dick all around, and it's like they like really make like a really like clear indentation of his dick in the outfit, and I'm just like, wait a minute, what's going on suddenly here? So yeah, between that and the offered orgy, which I bet Stephen King probably liked that part, 14-year-old girl, but...
allegedly, yeah. Yeah, weird moments of comedy. I think it comes down to, again, what I said, like it doesn't seem fun to be these kids. Am I wrong by saying like they like, again, you're surf ninjas in the title and they never surf ninja. Like they surf a couple times, sure, and there's other ninjas. But you know what? When you say surf ninjas, you got to put your 2 hands together. You have to start doing ninja stuff on surfboards. Am I wrong?
If I come to a movie called Surf Ninjas, I'm expecting to see 2 ninjas fight while surfing.
Yeah.
Using their boards against each other and shit like that, for sure.
Like at the bare minimum.
Yeah. No, the fact that that's missing is very bizarre. Like, obviously, Ninja is just in the title because of TMNT and because they wanted to connect to Ernie Reyes Jr.
Of course.
This could have been called, like, Surf Warriors or whatever. But mm-hmm. I mean, I guess the bad guys are ninjas, but not the best ninjas either.
No. But they don't surf. The bad guys don't surf.
No, it's true.
Stupid. The Sega Game Gear. Is this thing mystical? Is the kid controlling the narrative? Is this device made by Nostradamus? Is this a Black Mirror episode? What is happening with the Sega Game Gear?
It's strange because the Sega Game Gear thing is like the only mystical element of the movie, right?
Yeah.
But then again, it's so weird because this is definitely a movie that and I know, God, this is one of those cases where he sounds so dumb because we're talking about surf ninjas, and it's like, who cares about the logic of it? But like some thought should be put into this stuff. And like, what is the world of surf ninjas, right? What kind of world are they trying to create here? Because there's only one mystical thing, and that's the fact that Adam has a Game Gear that, as he plays it seems to predict the future. And then there's like so there's just that one mystical element. And then, as we just said, like Colonel Chi is like a cyborg, which is also like doesn't seem to fit into the reality of this world. So there's just like these weird things that seem disconnected from everything else. And the Game Gear is the most atrocious one, just because. Yeah. I mean, I went into the movie having already read a little bit about it, so I knew going into the whole thing with Sega, like helping to finance the movie and using this to, create this game and everything. But even if I hadn't known that, because I'm not an idiot, I'm pretty sure I would have put that together watching the movie. That this is really a commercial for the Sega Game Gear.
Yeah.
Like pretty bad. It's pretty blatant.
Well, it is because it's, Adam starts using it to actually even control people. So it's not clear. There's a lot of like really close up shots of it too, and like right onto the logo, and it's egregious. It's egregious. And then nobody bought the game, and nobody saw the movie. So it was like, what? Like, it's all for nothing. Fuck.
And they keep, like they come from Patusan, right? So it's supposed to be, like you said, they're supposed to be returning to this like kind of more, laid back traditional world. But then they do say, like, this is a movie that talks a lot about destiny, and they say, like, Johnny and Adam, you're both destined to be our rulers. Johnny, you're going to have this, beautiful wife, and you're going to be basically our king. Mm-hmm. Adam, you're going to be a seer. You're gonna be your whole role is you're supposed to have these visions. But then I wonder, like, well, what if he didn't have the Game Gear?
Yeah.
Because the Game Gear is giving him all the visions. So, like, if he didn't have that, would the visions come from something else? Why would this, like, traditional country of Patusan know about a Game Gear? How did they predict that? Like, that's what I mean. Like, the movie doesn't bother to answer these things. Not like I expected to, but still, put a little effort in.
But still, we've had this conversation a lot, just being friends, just about kids movies and stuff, right? And don't get me wrong, like I've enjoyed a lot of just dumb kids movies. Like I'm not the smartest sometimes, you know what I mean? But like, I think people give or don't give kids enough credit. Like kids loved Ninja Turtles. Kids loved Three Ninjas. Kids loved Karate Kid. There's a reason why kids did not like Surf Ninjas. And I think I don't want to say it, what's that about your intelligence? Assaults your intelligence? What am I trying to say?
Yeah, I don't want to insult your intelligence.
Is that what it is? Assault my intelligence? Okay, Insult, sorry. Yes, assault my intelligence. Where did he touch you in your intelligence? But yes, no, insult my intelligence. I think kids are cognizant a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, as a 10-year-old boy, you sat and watched Secret of the Ooze, and you're like, I'm embarrassed. Like this is selling toys to me right now, and this is a dumb movie. And I think time and time again, Hollywood doesn't treat their demographics with respect.
Yeah, but see, that's okay because like they, and you say the kids like maybe didn't respond to this because they could see the Game Gear commercial. They couldn't figure out how Colonel Chi and like his whole backstory. But that's all fine because the movie had the hilarious comedy of Rob Schneider to fall back on.
You can do it! Cover Winkler and Bees. You can do it. You can do it! You can do it! You can do it all night long! You can do it! You can do it, Nicky! Kick him in his hairy balls! You can do it, Ozzy! Bite his freaking head off! You can do it! Cut his fucking head off! You can do it! Get that old ass of yours in the end zone!
Correct.
Do we need to finally get into this?
Yeah, let's talk about Rob Schneider. This man has done almost 100 movies. I don't know about you, but I'm not a Rob Schneider fan.
Hot take.
Yeah, I know. Everybody sit down now. But he's the Adam Sandler guy. He's one of the buddies in that crew. And I think, when I was younger, he shows up in Waterboy, and then for a year we all said you can do it. But other than that, Rob Schneider shows up and he's devoid of humor. And now in his later years, he's like a crazy person. Allegedly, respectably, but I don't know. He's got an odd career because he's obviously very successful. He obviously is doing well, even from his early years.
I don't know if he's doing well now, but
Well, okay, yeah, fair enough. But I mean, like, even his early years, this Rob Schneider is not so different than his modern day stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's always the same bad one-liners constantly.
He comes from, so I'm sure we've probably had the same exact conversation because we talked about him when we did Judge Dredd. But this movie is like right at the tail end of his SNL run. Like, I think he leaves SNL 94. So yeah, like if sorry if I'm repeating anything we said before in that episode, but it's been a while, I don't remember.
Sure.
I actually did kind of like Rob Schneider on SNL. He was fine in those like small doses, I think. And not he was never a favorite of mine, but like did the copy guy kind of make me laugh when I was a kid? Sure. And were there other skits with him where I thought he was pretty decent? Yeah. I thought he was fine, but like he was like kind of in that that same cast with like Adam Sandler and David Spade and Chris Farley. He's obviously he's the weak link of that group.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And when he makes his jump into movies, it's never quite, especially his like solo stuff, the Deuce Bigalows and the Animals of the world are not as good as the Chris Farley and the Adam Sandler movies. And yeah, I don't know, like he definitely is just one of those guys who his peak was SNL for sure, to me. And like anytime, and then, like I think he's mildly funny in his small uncredited role in Demolition Man. But then that like gets him the bigger role in Judge Dredd, which like he's like working to sink that movie, as I'm sure we talked about in that. And then here too, he's that kind of, it's like my least favorite kind of like comedic support character, where that the movie, all right, the filmmakers just think he's so funny and he's going to save every scene, and they put like way too much focus on him. Now I will say again, I'm going to keep repeating this. The idea of his character is actually one of the more clever jokes in the movie that I think could have worked in a better movie. So he has this whole run. Like every character has like some kind of little thing here. That's another thing. The movie is maybe like a little bit too, like oddly enough for a movie this short and simplistic. Maybe a little bit too much going on to some degree, because every character has like their thing, right? But his thing is actually kind of funny, where a couple times early in the movie, he will just say this like hypothetical scenario.
Right.
And then that actually happens, right? They're like just talking at the beginning of the movie, and he says like, well, what if we were like, what if I was like the son of a king, or you guys were like the sons of kings? And then it turns out that's the case. He's like, oh my God, I was right, And then like a few minutes later, like ninjas attack the home of Johnny and Adam, and they're walking off, and he's like, well, and Zatch comes and saves them, but he sees Zatch leave the gas on, and he says like, well, what if the house had blown up because you did that? And then the house blows up. And so suddenly now Iggy, played by Rob Schneider, believes that anytime he says, what if something happens, it'll happen. So he thinks he has this like power. And I will say, if there's a couple jokes I think are actually kind of funny in this movie, one of them is later during a big fight scene. Everybody gets out and starts doing their thing, and he walks out and like puts his fingers to his temple and walks around like he's trying to use his mind, like, create these scenarios. I thought that was actually kind of funny. So that's a gimmick that could have been funny. But again, the movie is just so packed with like incessant, nonstop bad jokes that everything gets lost, even the stuff with potential. And he's guilty of that himself. They let him do that motor mouth. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Because the characters are annoyed by him, right? And I think we've talked about this before, about how like one of the least funny kind of characters are the ones that the movie says to be annoying.
Right.
Like when the movie takes a comedian and goes, hey, the characters in the movie should find you annoying, so just be annoying. That's never funny. Like that, it's the characters hate him. We're gonna hate him too.
Well, exactly that. Like it's never funny, and also this is like their best friend. Why?
Yeah.
Like nobody wants an annoying best friend, And he is. And again, the receding hairline. That's a real big problem. It's a real.
He's
big
literally
problem.
always trying to like steal what they have too, in a sense, right? Like I mean, like because he's always saying like, well, actually, it's me. I'm probably the one. Like this is like all a mistake. I'm the one who's actually like has the destiny to run Patusan. It's just like, what an asshole. Like,
you're right. He actually says it in the final scene of the film when like they've been crowned, and he starts looking around at these little kids and says, they're actually my decoys. I'm actually in charge. You guys are going to be my servants. Like, no, it comes off, just comes off bad, just bad. The end. When we get a musical number, Trev. And Trev knows that I love me a musical number.
Well, okay, now let's not hold the musical genre. Just let's not let the Bob Moran sequence from Surf Ninjas be, evocative of the entire musical genre of film. All right.
Okay, fair enough. But when it did start, and they started looking at the camera, I wrote in my notes, "Oh my God, no, a musical number." So, that was not my favorite.
It didn't seem to bother you in The Love Guru, or maybe they did. I don't know.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that bothered me.
No, let me tell you what I didn't like. Let me tell you what I thought was funny. Like ironically, bad funny about the end.
Sure.
So we talked about the story of this movie. The whole idea is that there's this island nation of Patusan, and Colonel Chi murdered its royal family, but they were able to get the two kids away, right? And so, like, for years, this island nation has been under the boot of Colonel Chi. And we see he's an evil ruler. He's got people in cages, he's drowning people, he's horrible. And you have to imagine that under his rule, this nation has probably had it pretty rough. We see that too, right? Like they're sold into slavery and everything. It doesn't look like they're doing very well. So they're very, very excited when these kids show up, and I realize that, yes, these are the kids who we know are destined to be our heroes. And like the kids come and they instantly accept them, and they show them joining up with the villagers, and they're all dancing together. And then they work with the villagers. The people of Hachusan rise up and help Johnny and Adam and Iggy and Zatch defeat Colonel Chi and win. And then they take their rightful place on the throne. And then Johnny makes a speech and instantly goes, we don't want this. Actually, we're going to leave. My first act as king is to say, actually, you're all in charge. It's a democracy. And then apparently I would assume they just kind of like peace out. And I was thinking, wait a minute, these people did have a monarchy for, apparently centuries. Now they've spent the last couple decades under the rule of this evil dictator, and then you're going to leave and just be like, hey, you guys all figure it out, right? I'm sure you can create a democracy system all by yourselves. Like that Pachusan probably plunged into chaos right after they left. The power vacuum they created.
Yeah, this is an allegory for the Iraq War. I think that's what's happening right now. They were ahead of their time.
Way ahead of his time.
Yeah. I thought that was quite funny. When that happened, I was gigantic eye roll. Okay, everything I watched or cared about was for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to what I was saying about kids. Like, if they wanted the kids to want to be Johnny and his brother, well, they just give it up at the end anyway. So like, why do I care to go watch Surf Ninjas 2? Like, what's gonna happen? They're not ninjas anymore. Like, they don't even rule anything. It's just a mad dash of nothing.
Yeah, or if you're going to have him give up the throne at the end, and I know I'm asking for like script doctoring on Surf Ninjas, but why not have a scene earlier where Kelly Hu is talking to him and she talks about how like the people here are actually ready to rule themselves, and he actually starts to see that, so we realize like that's actually the end of a dramatic arc of him realizing that the people would be better off without this. Just like little touches like that might be nice.
Instead of that conversation, she talks to him about backing out of the wedding because she wants to get a freak on. And wants to just date around for a while.
Yeah, that was weird because like she's basically like, yeah, we're not going to get married, but I'll still date you. And obviously we'll obviously fuck because I told you that earlier in the scene you were talking about.
She's like the new or she's the old school version of talking about an open relationship when the one person doesn't want that.
Well, hey, you know what? She's a sex positive, strong female character in 1993, Asian female character. So I'll give it up for it a little bit.
Asian minor.
I actually kind of do like that she's like, again, anytime I say I like something, keep in mind I'm kind of pointing to things that would have been better in a better movie still.
Of course.
But the idea that like the movie introduces her as someone who's just supposed to be given to him as a bride, and you go like, oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty, I get it. That's in these movies a lot. And then it's revealed that she actually has a lot of agency, and she's actually like a revolutionary who's like helping in this, out with this revolution to overtake Colonel Chi. I did like that, that's actually a good character for this kind of movie, but it's this movie.
Yeah.
Exactly. And speaking of that, can I talk about another moment of bad filmmaking that I think ruins an obvious joke?
Sure.
And I'm guessing you clocked this. I wonder if you clocked it as even where you were like, I wonder if Trevor likes this, but I'll tell you I don't because they like completely botch it. Because Chris, as a lot of my friends do, that one of my favorite kinds of comedy is when something goes on way too long. And this movie has a joke in the final battle about a particular henchman who keeps getting knocked down this like long flight of stairs, right? But the movie always cuts away from it too soon. Am I right? Like it never does the joke the right way. Like you want to watch him roll all the way down, and then you want to see him get all the way to the top, and you want to see it happen again. But they keep like they're insinuating that's what's happening, but it's like edited all wrong. And then they try to do it like a third time because we love a rule of threes. And like the third one is like the worst one because he like kind of throws himself down after he's told that his men lost. But it would have been like so much funnier if Ernie Reyes Jr. just walked up and gave him like one last kick, But
yeah, and like a
couldn't
cool
believe they like missed that.
Yeah, like a hero moment, I don't know. Yeah, Surf Ninjas. This was a slog. This was really bad, like quite bad.
This is one of the worst ones we've done.
Oh, for sure. It sucks,
and I know
too,
that's
because
crazy. Like in the last few months, like to me, it's like we did Love Guru, Maximum Ride, and then this. We're like really hitting some lows here.
Yeah, we're. I've been aging while we've been doing this. Yeah, it would just sucks because it's like such a good. Again, it's kind of like a cool, wholesome story to make this movie. I love the idea of Ernie Reyes Jr. Getting the spotlight of Hollywood on him for Ninja Turtles, and then them trying to craft a trilogy around this guy, and he's going to be the next great thing. Because again, the only big Asian male stars at this point are what? Bruce Lee, then Jackie Chan. And that's really it, you know? And Jackie Chan, the king of goofball comedies, or goofball martial art comedies, I would say. And this one just doesn't come to that level whatsoever, right? There's a reason why Jackie Chan is who he is. There's a reason why Bruce Lee was who he was, you know? And in this movie, it's like trying to do so many different things at once and failing on every single level. And it just sucks because it's a father and son team, wholesome story, came from nothing. Hollywood comes a-knocking for you. You know, You're 19 years old. You're a producer on the film too. You're the star. Your dad is the co-star. You guys are going to help write the script. Like that is incredible. We're going to go on location, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing about it. We didn't talk enough about his dad being in it because, like, I guess who cares? but like in terms of like the behind the scenes story, like you just said, like that's actually the most like amazing thing about it. Like because they had, you know, they were right. I think they did have something with Ernie Reyes Jr. And the fact that this movie bombed, and we've told a story we've told 100 times in this podcast already. You know, your one movie bombs and you're held responsible for it, and that's the end of, you know, your emerging career.
Yeah.
But the idea that not only did they have like a potential future star in Ernie Reyes Jr., but they had two of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And such an interesting story. Like that's so unique. How many father-son combos are there in movies where you could keep plugging them in? You know, there's a lot of like famous duos that people keep putting into movies, you know, like, oh, these two work well together. You know, your Bing Crosby and Bob Hopes and, you know, things like that.
Yep.
But you're The Rock and Kevin Hart, you know, even. But like, imagine how cool it'd be if there's like a series of movies with Ernie Reyes Sr. and Ernie Reyes Jr. And you could like do a lot of things where you could keep flopping it, where you do one movie. Oh, what about a body swap movie with the two of them? A martial arts body swap movie where the dad becomes the son and the son becomes the dad, you know? What about one where Ernie Reyes Sr. is like the screw up and his young son has to be more of the authority figure? You know, there's so many cool things you could have done with these two, but this movie fails and they're just cast aside to the shit heap. And that sucks because they, you know, especially Junior, I think this movie, however terrible it is, I do think he has real screen presence, and he's obviously got the martial arts talent. This movie doesn't allow him to show it off as well as we would like, but it's pretty clear it's there.
Yeah, and like, you know, Senior, his career was, you know, he was a little older at this point when this movie came out, but Junior's was just starting, you know, and looking at what he did after and continues to do, it is just kind of recruit. Body double, you know,
he has like a
guy in background.
He has a standout fight scene with The Rock in The Rundown. Do you remember that? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, other than that, never really feature again.
So Surf Ninjas 2, like, I mean, is this like, I don't know if I really believe these actors when they're reminiscing about movies, talking about how many people come up to them at conventions. Do you believe those? Truly?
I do. Well, I do only because, like I said, I think there was, like, especially back then. Look, I've said it before. It's just true. We had less options for entertainment.
No, you're right. You're right.
So a lot of movies just kind of built up these followings, and I could see this being one of them. Now, I don't think this doesn't have a gigantic cult following, but I'm sure at a convention there's probably some people come up and be like, "Yeah, I was related to Surf Ninjas." I will say though, because I thought this is what you're going to mention. I can't remember how many of these we've done before, but like one of my favorite things, it's something I encounter so many times, and I'm sure you do too, is that there was a more recent interview with Nicholas Cohen, who plays Adam, you know, the younger brother. It was like one of those kids who did this movie and like kind of just he didn't really keep on acting or whatever.
No.
But he says, they're like, yeah, so many people come up to me and say they've liked it. I've written a script for Surf Ninjas too. And that's like one of my favorite things. I don't know how often you've seen this, Chris, but there's so many cases where like some cult movie, like one of the supporting actors is like, yeah, I wrote a script for the sequel. If people just get in touch with me, and it's like no one is coming to you for you to make Surf Ninjas true. Trust me, don't bother. Put your pen down.
Yeah. I think he's doing like graphic design now. So yeah, stick to that. Honestly, Trev, that's really. I'm shocked we have gone this long.
I know.
I'm shocked. It's just a testament to our skills as stretching time. I really don't know. I can't believe we've been talking this long. But this is bad. This is bad. Don't watch it. Don't revisit it. If you did love it, don't revisit it. Keep that memory.
Wrong. If you think you like it, no, your 8-year-old self liked it.
Yes. And your 8-year-old self was wrong at the time. But that's okay. That'll do it for this one. Next episode in Summer Surprise, we're looking at the 2003 version of The Haunted Mansion. This is kind of wild because the new Haunted Mansion reboot is coming out like I think by the time that one airs, it would have come out. So
Yeah. And we'll do that episode in 2027.
It's so funny because I was going to ask you off mic. I was like, should we maybe try to go see it to see if we can compare?
I'm gonna see it.
You are going to see it?
Yeah, I'm gonna see it. So I'll be able to compare if nothing else. I'm not requiring you to though. I can just talk about it.
You can do the work.
Yeah,
you can do the work. Okay, cool. So yeah, next episode, The Haunted Mansion from 2003, and then we are going to be capping off Summer Surprise with Artemis Fowl from 2020. And once again, listeners, if you're thinking about skipping Artemis Fowl, don't. We got something special planned. I think that one's going to be a riot. That's going to be a good one. That's going to be a good one. Yeah. Just so follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2 F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. Star rating would be cool. A review would be sweet. It would be totally righteous if, you give us 3 or 4 or 5 stars, whatever you want, my dudes, And then just, join the tribe and hit us subscribe, Wow, my brain broke for a second here at the end.
The one thing I'll say though is you put like more effort into that opening and that closing of that than like any of the performers doing this, trying to sound like actual surf kids.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Great beginning.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that was great. We riffed a lot, eh? That was fun. That was fun.
Rob Schneider brings it out in us. The spirit of Rob Schneider.